That is James Mennie. He is over at the Montreal Gazette. And Jim, I guess we'll start today by what we were just hearing from Annie Bergeron-Oliver. Mark Carney, big announcement today on bail reform. Are you
Yeah,
are you laughing?
I certainly am, and not just because I'm a normally happy, jolly fellow, but because with this announcement, we have discovered a new offense in Canada. It's not in the criminal code, at least not yet, but it's called political shoplifting. And the plaintiffs, of course, will be the Conservatives of the Conservative Party of Canada, really now. Bail reform and consecutive sentences. Where ever heard that before? Oh, yeah, with the Conservatives,
Yeah.
and indeed, in the days of Stephen Harper. Now, what turned Mark Carney around? What turned the Liberals around? Once again, like we always say, Aaron, there's been some internal polling, and it's showing that we know that the cushion that Mark Carney had been riding thanks to Donald Trump, is becoming thinner and thinner and thinner. And I think some people are looking at other issues and saying, listen, perhaps we can pump some air into that and keep us afloat. Remember, this is a minority government. But I find it fascinating that in terms of flipping the entire bail system on its head, because the idea is, it's the justice system, innocent until proven guilty, and you have to prove why someone, is a risk to be let outside. Now, the thing is, if repeat offenders were already being let outside, that says more about the job the Crown was doing, I think, than the law itself. But all that to one side, the fact of the matter is they're now making it incumbent on the defense to say, this is why my client should not be held in cells pending his or her trial, which can be a big deal given the amount of time sometimes it takes for cases to come to trial. But the other thing that gets me at is the consecutive sentences, which is honestly, it is, as far as I'm concerned, that's the lead of the story, and it's kind of getting the back of the news day's hand on this, simply because, well, maybe they don't know enough about it, and the Prime Minister is making all these very reassuring, like, I'm sure that it's going to be charter compliant. It isn't. We know for a fact, and indeed, a case in Quebec, the Quebec City mosque shooting, is where this case, where this jurisprudence crystallized. They wanted to put the shooter away for 150 years.
Right. And
they said, no, that's cruel and unusual. And there was this weird kind of auction on eligibility for parole, which eventually wound up at something like 45 years. That went to the Court of Appeal, got kicked out. That went to the Supremes. And they said, no, this is cruel and unusual. It's 25 years, end of story. So for the Prime Minister of Canada to say, we believe this is going to be charter compliant, no matter what the charge is, Aaron. I really hope he's not being super clever by saying, well, Section 33 is a part of the charter, i.e., the notwithstanding clause is part of the charter. And if somebody raises, some civil rights groups turns around and takes us to court, we'll just invoke the notwithstanding clause. Easy as that. But what it does also show, and we're seeing that in other polls as well, is that rightly or wrongly, and as I say, perception is everything. People are feeling less safe. People are feeling more threatened by crime. This seems to be the federal government's reaction to it, and we'll see just how far this goes. This can just be a lot of performative nonsense, or with the notwithstanding clause, it can be the law of the land for the next 5 years.
By the way, with respect to, political thievery, and you're right, because they basically stole this page from the Conservatives, but you got to think some people, though, will look at this and go, well, at least the guy's listening, and that's a good thing.
Well, yeah, you could say that, or, listen, it's all a matter of perception. As far as I'm concerned, they're doing this because they are, I've also talked about the ongoing de-Trudification of the party,
Yeah.
which he's just dismantling everything that Justin Trudeau did to the Liberals, the way Justin Trudeau dismantled everything that those who came before him did to the Liberal Party. However, I just find it, we're not talking about, a trade policy here. We're talking about people's lives, whether it's keeping dangerous criminals off the street or putting, answer the question about our carceral system. It's supposed to be, rehabilitation. So putting someone in the hole for 50 years, you're basically saying, no, you're not going to be rehabilitated. You're done. Yeah. And we're just too chicken to hang you. This is the argument. But to see that the government turn around at this point in time, remember, they haven't even been in power for a year. At this point in time, to see that come through, I just find it rather, maybe I'm too cynical, but I find that move in and of itself to be quite cynical.
All right, let me talk about what's going on locally, because this is going to go into our question coming up. We had our big debate this morning.
Yeah.
Projo Montreal, Ensemble Montreal, both in studio, went for an hour without commercial interruption, which is, rarely happens here. And I think they covered a lot of topics. You're asking, are the mayoral frontrunners that change Montreal needs? Do I take that to mean, I don't know what you heard this morning, but do you take that to mean you haven't heard anything yet to change your mind in terms of no one being able to really break through?
Well, no, but the other thing that's intriguing, and when Elias was mentioning, the rules of engagement, he said that, we're keeping this to candidates who are polling more than 10%. But there are others, and we're going to have another debate with the people who are below, the less than 10%ers, will have their own debate. And I'm thinking, and I understand, I've been in that chair before, Aaron, I understand what the constraints are. But I was really wondering, listening to Madame Martinez-Ferrara and Monsieur Rabelin kind of go at it, but also do a lot of cassette playing. I was wondering, what if a third or a fourth or a fifth voice had been in there? What if we not necessarily have a long shot candidate turning around and talking about his or her policies, but rather taking a poke at the policies which seem increasingly likely to be executed in this city? And I felt to a certain extent, and I'm not blaming CJAD, you're doing what you can, but the fact is, and most media have been doing this, right? I mean, it's been at the most, it's been three voices, and we both know, our listeners know as well, that given the polls, we're not really sure who exactly the front runners are and whether the gap between those two candidates is as large between them and the other three or four. I just find it frustrating, and I realize that we're constrained in what we can do. But I think this morning I would have walked away a little more gratified as a listener and, as an ex-Montrealer, knowing perhaps a little more perspectives as opposed to, I will undo what he did, or no, we have to keep doing what we've been doing for the past 8 years. That's that was the horizon on this debate I found. And I'm just wondering whether we would have been better served to have a few more voices in that.
Which kind of begs me to ask the question, you heard about Craig Sauvé this morning talking about La Spirale, the right at La Ronde that they're going to be having to knock down?
I remember being at La Ronde when La Spirale was new. And I didn't, Montreal Landmark, it didn't really, in fact, when I had to look it up because I wasn't even sure it was still up for him to turn around and say, let's save it. You know what I mean?
How did this become an election issue?
Why didn't somebody speak up with the flume ride? That's what I want to know.
Fair
that was so cool.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, listen, I don't know. Listen, it's his time. It's his campaign time. He wants to spend it doing that. That's up to him. But I'm not sure who exactly he's talking to on that one.
That's something that's funny you say that. I heard one of the calls that Elias played, and I'd heard this earlier in the week, was some guy calling up and saying, we have right turn on red in other areas of the city. Is it time to have them in Montreal? And I thought to myself, okay, as far as major issues go, that's not one of them. And no. I'm not even sure how high up on the minor issues list that would be either. But it was addressed this morning, and I'm thinking, have we kind of lost the focus here?
Yeah.
Of what is important or what most Montrealers find important, and that's why there's still so many with I don't know?
Well, my friend, you may have inadvertently stumbled upon the answer to all these undecided numbers that we're seeing, to all this. I think people are so punch-drunk over the excuses, over the baffle-gab, over the perpetual immobilisme, as we say in Montreal, and not just of this administration. This has been going on for decades, buddy. And I think people are just saying, well, I can't get that, so let's do something like this. Right turns on reds and whatever. Believe me, as you quite rightly point out, there are major problems in Montreal, and you know what? I wouldn't even put homelessness is there. I think it's very, very. Is it number one? Is housing number one? I think actually getting this city to work and convincing people that this city is the place to stay in is job one for all of the candidates. And maybe that's what I've been missing. Yeah. Maybe you're missing something else. Maybe you're going to get calls later in the show saying, no, this is what I want to hear them talking about. But you know what? It just seems that there is, even on the part of the candidates, Aaron, it seems there's a certain resignation that, we'll never be able to do this. So let me go focus on this over here, which, as important as it is not going to make a huge difference to my daily life. You know what I mean? It's like the conversation is taking place in another room when in fact we're the ones who are paying for the rental on the whole place. It doesn't make any sense, and perhaps maybe that's why people are not getting engaged in this or perhaps any other municipal election.
I'll just leave it at one thing. You've been around a long time, and it seemed to me today, I can't remember the last time in a municipal election, and please correct me if I'm wrong, when downtown or what downtown looked like became such a pivotal issue here, the difference between two major candidates here. When is the last time the downtown core came into focus in a municipal election? Do you remember?
Well, I mean, back in the day, let's say my era with the most experience dates from the time Gerald Tremblay became mayor. Certainly cleanliness downtown, crime downtown, these have always been issues, feeling safe downtown. But I think with the construction, with the delays, with the orange cones, with the detours, with the fact that St. Catherine, which is supposed to have been our showplace, St. Catherine Street was supposed to be the symbol of Montreal, being turned into a lunar landscape for years at a time. I mean, I remember when I was still living in Montreal, and I went downtown, and the first time I saw that devastation, Aaron, my jaw dropped. I went, What the hell have they done? What have they done? And it was like, oh, this is normal. This is overdue. We have to do this. Well, you know what? People are not going to come back. People are going to remember that. And I think the idea of saying, if somebody turns around and says, listen, I'm going to fix downtown. I'm going to make it work. I'm going to make it a downtown that you remember. I'm going to do it sooner rather than later. And don't stand in my way. I think that person is going to get a lot more votes than someone who says, let's wait and see.
Last thing I remember I think it might have been Denny Coderre talking about, the idea of heated sidewalks, remember, for downtown and covering St. Catherine's Street in like a shell or something.
Oh, yeah. I remember he's going to keep the bars open past 3 a.m.
Yeah.
Wow.
I remember those days. James Mennie at the Montreal Gazette. Thank you, Jim.
The biggest songs in the world. You've heard them countless times. Now, learn the details of how they came to be. Join Ruby Carr for Encore, the stories behind the songs you love. New interviews and newly unearthed archive footage make for a fascinating weekly deep dive. Stream Encore, the stories behind the songs you love on iHeartRadio or wherever you get your podcasts.